money has been given this branding that is very complicated. It's not that complicated. It's actually quite easy. Like if you could do medicine, you could do money. The money equation in my mind is your income minus your expenses equals your opportunity. That opportunity was my ability to pay off my debt. I could work more or I could decrease my expenses. And to my husband's chagrin, because I'm from Flint, because I grew up in simple means, I knew how to make the most. I would unplug things like the microwave and the TVs.
Good night, everybody. What we preach on the show all the time is that nobody's paying off debt in 2+ years by accident. You have to be very purposeful, and unplugging the appliances is diabolical, as the kids say.
I left the refrigerator plugged in, right? Because I didn't want to waste the food.
Yo, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Docs Outside the Box. This one is a special episode. We got Dr. Brittne Halford, who is the co-host of the Wealth Minded MD podcast, which is a new and upcoming podcast that y'all need to be looking at and listening to. Very briefly, Dr. Brittne is an internal medicine doctor up in Boston, one of the worst places that I hate to hang out with. Hey,
why you hated on her in her introduction?
Boston is whack, and you know it. It's all good. Your streets are too small. It's too cold. And
people do park however they want.
Dr.
Front,
Brittne,
back,
don't take
sideways.
this personally, but Boston is whack. You know it too. But Dr. Brittne, she's like, why is all this hate starting with this?
It's her introduction. Good Lord. Ain't nobody come to the show no more.
She is married to a psychiatrist. And not only is she dope, right? She's an internal medicine doctor. She puts up with Boston. She's doing her thing. But yo, check this, guys. She paid off $138,000 in 2 years and 9 months.
Ooh, Alfred, give us a little confetti. Woohoo!
Yeah, that's a big deal. That's a lot of dedication. That's a lot of coins. That's a lot of, cheese that you get. And you're like, nah. Yes. I'm not going to spend on this. Yes. Nah, I'm not going to save this. I'm just going to give this straight to whoever, Sally Mae or whoever it was, Nelnet, and that's it.
Yep.
So that's what's up.
Somebody.
So Dr. Brittne, welcome to Docs Outside the Box. We love you. So it's not with the, everything I said in the beginning is just, we just joking around, but welcome to the show.
You really don't like Boston.
Your boss is whack. Come on. You know it too. Come on.
It has grown on me. So thank you for having me on the show. I'm super excited to have this conversation, and I already feel the energy of how it's going to be. So I'm going to push back a little bit. I know this is your show, but you called me out in the introduction. So we're going to see what
you want to use your capital to defend Boston. Go ahead. It's on you. It's on you. But hey,
I don't. It has grown on me, and it offers a lot of great things, and I can understand like the historical racism, segregation, and some of that definitely plays into how it is perceived. But we are growing and choosing to love Boston. So
there you go. There you go.
So how did you end up in Boston? Tell us a little bit about your journey from what med school you went to all the way to where you're at now.
Yeah, so I am originally from Flint, Michigan, born and raised.
Okay.
And yes,
okay.
That is a whole
right.
nother conversation. But, I went to the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, so go blue. I'm a Wolverine. Okay. And from there, I went to Northwestern for medical school, and I got my medical degree and MPH there as well. Then I matriculated to WashU for residency and
St. Louis. Okay.
St. Louis. Love that. Then I got married, and we were doing long distance for a while. My husband went to Morehouse for his residency and in psychiatry. And there was an opportunity for us to move to Boston.
Familiar. When did he graduate from Morehouse residency?
So he completed his residency in 2018. Like the end of 2018 for residency.
I was gone by then.
Yeah.
I was gone by then.
You were
I was
long gone by then.
Because you don't know about me? Morehouse? Yo, that was my spot. I owned,
He owned Morehouse.
No, Morehouse. Yo, come on. That was my old stomping ground.
Okay.
Come on.
You
but
owned
your
Morehouse.
legacy precedes you, because I was talking to my husband. He was like, oh, yeah, I've connected with him once or twice. Yeah. So he maybe I shouldn't have said that. I'm stroking egos over here. Let me stop.
My arm is hurting. For those of you watching on video, knee just hit me like 5 times.
The best surgery resident ever, yo. The best surgical resident, yo. Morehouse Grady. What? All right. Anyway, keep going. I'm hyped this time.
So from there, my husband is a psychiatrist and he wanted to do child psychiatry. And so he started at Boston Children's Hospital, and that's what led us to Boston. And
that is tough.
Honestly, I thought we were going to go back to Atlanta. I loved it. I was an attending at Emory. And while there, no one questioned my authority. No one questioned my intellect. And when there was some disagreements between other staff members and my assessment or evaluation of the patient, we just hashed it out. We just like, Dr. Brittne, what's going on? And we talked about it, and we did what was best for the patient. And when I moved to Boston, that was something that I still had to kind of work through and establish. And then my husband became the chief behavioral officer of the Boston Public Health Commission, which is an inaugural position, and he creates basically the mental health plan for the city of Boston. He works with the mayor's office. At that point in time, I was like, okay, this is a Black man assuming a new role, and I want him to do well. So we decided to stay. And we own 2 properties here. Our baby's there at school, and we're invested. We're invested. And it's been great. It's been great. We found a really great church home and created our community. So we're grateful for Boston.
Now, how long have you guys been attending for?
So I've been in attending since 2016. I graduated from residency. And my husband, so he did the child psych fellowship, and he did like a concurrent mix. I don't know. His pathway is not traditional. So there's some overlap. So if I quote this wrong, I'm sorry, babe. Because
I know your husband. Isn't your husband with Harvard?
He is with Harvard. Yeah.
Dr. Simon?
Dr. Simon. Yeah. Kevin Simon.
Oh, yeah. I was like, wait, this is sounding way too familiar. I know.
Yeah. I know who that is. Who that is. Yeah.
So he did an addiction medicine fellowship in addition to his child psych fellowship. So I think he became an attending like 2021, I think, but my dates might be off. So I apologize if my dates are off.
Yeah.
See, in our toxic household, whoever finished first would just be son and the other person, right? So
that would be me. Finishing first.
Okay. She sons me all the time. I'm like, wait, hold on a second. I'm an attending too. She's like,
not before I was. Okay. I'll grade you.
Anyway, but that's amazing. So you guys have been roughly at least 8 years on your end that you have been attending. Okay.
Yes.
Now, do you remember how much your debt was when you graduated from med school? Do you remember how much it was?
So I had $131,000 when I graduated from medical school.
Okay. And then by the time you finished residency, was it 138 or?
By the time I finished residency, it was 135. So basically from medical school, we all do these exit interviews where we meet. They would review your debt profile, your student loan debt profile, and they're like, okay, well, essentially what they told me at Northwestern is to enroll in the income-driven repayment plan and sign up for public service loan forgiveness. And so taking that advice, that's what I did. But we all know that, with student loans, I don't know, for me, I hated verifying my income in my employer every year for the public service loan forgiveness. We know that sometimes who they put in positions as representatives and administrators in the Department of Education are sometimes not the most knowledgeable. And so I just kind of hated just this reliance on the government to forgive my student loans. And at the time, public service loan forgiveness actually had...
That's my point.
Renee talks about that all the time. She says like, you have like, you spend your entire life trying to have major control over your career, how you study, the grades you get. And then all of a sudden, literally a major portion of your paycheck, you don't know if it's going to get forgiven at the end of 10 years. And it's kind of depending on who's in the government. So I can see that being a major issue for folks.
Yeah, and honestly, it's like when I talk to people about finances, it's all about control. It's all about strategy. It's all about understanding how your money is moving. And for me, that level of uncertainty, I just really didn't agree with. So I started paying a little bit extra when I was in residency. And once I graduated from residency, that's when I did a refinance. The economic conditions were different then, but I was able to refinance my student loans from a 6.8% interest rate to a 3.5% interest rate over a 5-year term. But I was like, okay, if I could pay this monthly fee and I'm maxing out a 401k and I'm still traveling and I got cash flow, let me just get this gone.
So wait,
now,
just to be clear, so in residency, on a resident salary, you were paying more than what your minimum payment was.
So I was, yes, I
Wow.
was paying more than what my minimum payment was because at that point in time,
impressive.
I had determined that I was no longer going to seek forgiveness. And so if I had additional cash flow that was just sitting, now retrospectively, I realized I could have been doing some other things with my money that probably would have afforded more returns. But at that time, that was the one thing that I knew how to do. And that was the one debt that I knew would be a guaranteed return on investment. So it wouldn't be a set amount every single month. I didn't create a budget for the additional payments. But when I realized that all of my bills had been paid and I still had money to travel to go see my husband who was at Morehouse and I had a little bit of money extra, then I would just throw the extra at the student loans.
Let me ask you, so that was a pretty savvy move, right? Because a lot of people who might get into medical school, get the loans to pay for medical school, graduate with a ton of debt, go through residency, might not necessarily be so savvy as to figure out that, well, I'm not going to do this loan repayment. I'm just going, I'm going to max out my 401k. Where did you learn to do all of that? Was that something that your parents instilled in you? Was it podcasts? Was it blogs? Like, where did you learn all of that?
And how did you not feel overwhelmed? Because I'll piggyback on top of that. Like,
don't piggyback on my question. Don't piggyback on my question.
You want me to just write it down here?
Yeah, write it down and save it for later. She will take questions at the end.
Okay.
I love it.
How'd you learn all of that?
So, Renee, to answer your question, right? Your question. No, I'm just kidding. After I graduated from medical school and I had my exit interview and started making money, I had this revelation that I was the only doctor in my family at the time and that I would have a huge responsibility of managing a large sum of money and having to do that well because there were still people in my family who I desire to support, right? Not only just financially by giving them money, but also helping them to facilitate better stewardship over their money. So at that time, and I think this is still existing, but I don't listen to it as frequently, it was Marketplace Money on NPR. I was like an avid consumer of Marketplace Money on NPR, and they just taught essentially some of the basics. I also read the White Coat Investor book from James Dolly, and I really appreciate the knowledge that he shares about money and how physicians can be good stewards and good managers of their money. And then, reflecting on just my history, I am grown from Flint, Michigan of low means. My mom's like, girl, don't say that. But essentially we were. Like I did the retroactive calculations of how much money my mother earned and how our household size. And I realized that we were actually living under the federal poverty line for a good portion.
Yeah, it's real.
Growing up.
That's real. Yep. A lot of people don't think about it that way. Yeah. They don't think about it that way.
They don't. But, then when I think about it, my mom made a lot out of what she had. And she created these moments of joy out of little. So I didn't need to live in a nice area per se, or live in like this building, I know some of my co-residents, they lived in a building with a gym and all of these like luxurious
amenities,
things. Amenities. I didn't do that. I lived in a neighborhood that was safe. I shopped at Aldi's. I got all of my free meals through Residency. I went to the gym that the Residency paid for, that I got a discount for. And I lived pretty simply so that I could create cash flow that allowed me to achieve my goals.
Right.
See, what I wanted to piggyback on, can I talk now?
Now you can.
So what I wanted to piggyback on was when I was in residency and just starting, I think we kind of come from similar backgrounds.
Yeah.
But like I just found myself just literally like in a rat race of wake up, try to get to work, try to get there, be the best surgical resident I could be. You're staying there late. You study at night, and then you wake up and you rinse, wash, and repeat. And the last thing I had on my mind was just finances, right? Because I literally was like, okay, do I have enough to pay my mortgage? Do I have enough to pay my bills? I wasn't thinking about saving. I just wanted to just get through residency because I just wanted to get through residency. And like for me, I wish I was at your mindset, right? So I guess the thing that I want to ask is like, how did you like not feel like you were drowning between trying to survive as a resident, be in a new city and all those different things, survive residency, get through, thrive, and then also at the same time have this like forward-thinking plan that even the extra bit that I have, I'm going to put towards this delayed gratification of paying off my debt. Talk to me about that. Like, how did you just make that decision? Like, this is where the money's going to go, right? Because to me, that's tough, right? So talk to me about that.
I think it just starts with having a mindset of whatever habits and behaviors you develop today have compounding interest. And I am a little bit of a hoarder of digital clutter. And I found a budget that I created in medical school. And it didn't dawn on me like at the time, but just being able to manage the money, my student loans and the money that I had coming in at medical school and developing a budget then helped me to master that skill. So when I got to residency, I could build upon it. I could now think about creating a debt strategy and understanding what an income-driven repayment option is. And okay, if it's based upon my income, so what do I got to do to lower my income, to lower my payments if I'm seeking for forgiveness? It allowed me to capitalize and understand that okay, I have these moments in which I'm cooking, I'm cleaning, I'm doing other things that I can build in some education here outside of medicine. And how can I do that? By capitalizing on an audio version of learning material. So I don't have to necessarily sit down and read, but I am still building this muscle. And to understand that financial literacy has two components. It has the acumen, so the understanding, the stuff that we read about in the books, but it also has the utilization of that information. And so I knew then that if I don't start to practice these small skills, when I become an attending and making a lot of money, then I'm more susceptible to making mistakes. So let me just practice at my lower threshold, right? My lower income.
So Dr. Brittne, you talking what I'm talking. I keep telling these folks, listen, so I didn't do it, right? So I didn't practice those skills. But we always say, what you laughing at? But it's the truth.
You're shedding a tear.
No, because I always tell people, listen, it's like, do it when the stakes are low. Right? When the stakes are lower, right? Like you should be trying to try to pay off some debt, try to invest a little bit right now, because when you get into this pile of money that you're not used to having, right? Some of y'all don't even know how to write a check, right? When you get to that point where you are, what do you call it? Let's be real. Let's be real.
Surprise.
Right? Some of y'all don't even know how to write a check when by the time you're becoming an attending. Like, how are you expected? You're going to be more, more gun shy, so to speak. And excuse the pun, but more shy to take action. And that's when you're going to start hiring people to make the decisions for you. Right. And then that's when they're going to start to take advantage of
all that money.
Take all that money. Now you're paying someone 1% to basically put your money on an automatic investing plan when it's like you could have did it yourself.
And they don't do it as well. Like studies show that they don't do it as well compared to like a more passive form of investing. And so, keep preaching. I hear that wholeheartedly. But I think a lot of us just feel like when I talk to residents, I recently gave a talk on financial wellness to African students, like there was more public health, medical students, and some attending at an African health conference. And one person, she's like, I was talking to my friend who does finance, and he told me that I should wait to start investing because even if I can only invest like $100, like that's not going to afford me anything. And I'm like, it's not necessarily the amount that you're investing, it's the habit that you're building. Right. And so I think sometimes we often defer the education until we arrive to the moment. And then, right. And then we feel like, oh, well, I'm not an expert in this, so let me give this over to somebody else. So I wholeheartedly agree. I think financial education, we all have to make money, but no one is going to care more about the money that you make than you do.
Oh, man.
So why not start caring today?
Yeah.
I feel like praise music in the background. She knows what she's talking about. She knows what she's talking about.
No, I mean, it's true. I mean, but that's with any skill, right? And I don't know why people take the skill of either managing your money or investing your money or doing whatever it is that you need to do with your money any differently, and I it's funny because, I work with pre-meds all the time. And even the skill of answering questions for the MCAT, for example, a lot of them wait until, well, no, I have to do all of the review first before I look at even one question. And I'm like, let me ask you a question. If you or a loved one of yours was pregnant and then they came to me and I'm like, well, I read a lot about C-sections. I read a whole lot about it. Okay. And I finished the last page about C-sections today, on the day that you are getting ready to have your baby. Am I the person that you want doing your C-section?
Right.
Probably not.
Right.
So you need to build up
you
that
need to practice
skill.
it. Yeah.
Right.
And take
you need
the chances.
to practice.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I got a question for you. So your spouse, did he have debt also?
He did. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, in terms of the debt, how do you guys look at debt? Like, is it in a similar situation where, like, is it your debt? Is it his debt? Your own debt? Do you mind speaking about that at all?
I don't mind. I'm an open book.
Okay.
So it's really interesting. I get a lot of flack from my co-host of our podcast about this because we kind of have in the management of our finances and also our debt, like this is mine, this is yours, and this is ours. And so we have those three buckets. And that's how we thought about our debt. When I was paying off my student loan debt, it was my debt. So I could do what I chose to do with my debt. And when I was paying it off, my husband was still in residency, so he didn't afford anything to that debt payoff. Now, when he had his debt, I was a little bit more advanced in now understanding, okay, what does it look like to refinance, right? No, seriously, I had a little bit of experience behind me.
You sunned them. You told them exactly what we're going to do. This is what we're going to do right here, Dr. Cotton, all right? Just follow my lead.
That's so funny.
That's what Dr. Renee did to me, though. In a good way.
I did do that.
In a good way. We made a plan to pay off our debt, right? Our plan was to pay off our debt in about 15 years?
The first plan was 15 years, and then it came down to 5 years, and then I was like, nope, we could do it in 3.
Right. And I came home from work, and she met me at the door and was super excited about how we could pay off the debt faster than 5 years. And I'm the type of person who, if we make a plan, stick to the plan.
He really is.
Because I'm just when we stick to a plan, let's just stick to a plan. So she was like, no, I got a plan that we could pay it off maybe in 3 years or even in, what'd you say, 3 or 1 year?
No. Well, yeah. I looked at the 3 year, the 1 year, and the 5 year. And I was like, I think we can do the 3 year. We definitely couldn't do 1.
So she went through all the different permutations of it. And I was like, all right, it makes sense. And I literally followed her lead. And rather than 5 years, we did it in 3.
See?
So Dr. Brittne, what I'm saying is whoever has the knowledge, that's who we going with and stuff. So,
what'd you tell your husband?
Yeah. So at that time, and I love that you listen me to Renee and her plan. And Renee, I love that you were excited, actually, because I get very excited. Like I go to sleep calculating some of these things, and my husband's like, okay, just hold on. I get
like
a
a beautiful
whiteboard
mind.
and I draw it out.
Yes.
So at that time, he had a loan that was very, very high interest while he was in residency. And I'm like, I think we could refinance just this one particular loan to get the interest rate down. And so that's what we did. We just took a chunk of that while he was still in residency, and we refinanced that, and we paid that down pretty aggressively. You know, what I learned from that experience is when I refinanced my student loans, I went for a 5-year fixed. So I knew I had 5 years and that this was going to be the payment. And so I could budget around that, even if I paid extra on it, as I did. But for him, because we wanted to get a lower interest rate, we did an ARM instead, an adjusted rate agreement. I guess it's not a mortgage, but adjusted rate agreement. And I did not like that. Personally, I don't know how he felt about it, but the interest rate just kept going up, you know?
Right. That's the thing that scares me the most.
Yeah, because they say variable or adjusted, but it never goes down.
Yeah. You know, at that point, it was not going down. It was, So I didn't like the variability of that. And so we paid that off pretty aggressively while he was still in residency. And then once he did his fellowship, when we moved to Boston, we took advantage of an extremely low interest rate and a refinance. Now, when we did that, we actually had a bit of a different view on debt between he and I, because by that time
y'all had a fight.
We did not have a fight because it was still his debt,
nice
right?
About it. She trying to be nice about it and stuff. Listen, Dr. Brittne.
It was about to go down.
We 9 years in podcasting. We know how it goes. We had a little disagreement and stuff.
A little, skerfuffle.
We squabbled up, like, come on. Dr. Brittne, come on.
Stop. No squabbling over here. We don't squabble.
We pod in here, Dr. Brittne. Tell the truth, man. Come on.
Leave her alone.
Okay, so let me explain. I think because some people think debt is the devil, and I don't feel that way. I used to. That's why I paid off my student loans so aggressively. And I think that I had evolved a little bit in understanding how to leverage a lower interest rate and maybe do an interest rate arbitrage, put more money into the stock market to build our net worth faster than to pay down the debt aggressively. But he still had the debt. It was in his name and it was his debt. So
so he feels like he has more. Right. He has more at stake. He has more at stake.
He has more at stake. And we also just have to acknowledge how emotional money can be. I think sometimes we think about finances as being completely logical, like the numbers say this and this is what you should do. But there's a huge psychological component to money. And I think if we're unable to reconcile those emotions, then we're going to lead down a path that's going to maybe lend itself to different results, or at least it will help us to heal whatever emotional turmoil and, dissonance that we're having internally. So I think that that's where we were. I was debt free at that point. I had paid off my debt, so it wasn't my responsibility. This was his debt that he felt was his responsibility. But I'm like, if you can leverage and put this money in the stock market instead, then we could potentially grow our net worth faster. And the numbers are going to make sense. But from a psychological and emotional perspective, he's like, no, but I still got this debt that I don't want to have.
What y'all decide to do? Or what did he decide to do?
So he paid off his debt pretty aggressively. And it was at a low interest rate. It was like at 2.9. And I don't remember the exact amount. I'll have to go back to take a look. But I think he had like 120 or 150 at that point when he was in fellowship and paid it off pretty aggressively.
So I think you are absolutely right when you talk about that there's numbers and then there's like the emotional aspect of it. She describes that emotional aspect better than me. I'm more of the numbers type person. But we paid off $662,000 in 3 years.
Whoa.
I remember. Do you remember those months where there was literally like a $20K payment?
Yes.
There was like a $20,000
Yes.
payment that we made to the student loan company. Like that, because what we ended up doing is we ended up doing locums in addition to our other jobs to pay off the debt quicker. So when you talk about that emotional component of like, okay, this is what's in your bank account, and just being like, yeah, nah, that's for Navient, and just push it right into the middle, and it's just gone. It was so painful. But you know, when we saw the next month's calculation and the interest like decrease so much because there was less principal, that's what, the logical side is like, okay, this is working.
Right.
But that was painful to see that like $20K leaving. You know what I'm saying?
It's not like Johnny had 6 apples. You know what I mean? It's not, you're not reading something, just a word problem, right? You're really, really taking this on because it has to do with you. It is personal, because it is personal. So, I think if while the arbitrage is real, right, where you could certainly increase your net worth, even faster, the reality is that in order to, going back to like building up that muscle of, paying off, or investing and doing all the other things that you can do with your money, that emotional block is then decreased. That emotional block just lowers. And so now he might be so much more open to doing all of those things and taking those risks because he doesn't have the debt.
Sometimes this may be something that it's just not for y'all. Do you see, like, what I'm saying is when you feel like when you come from, for example, when you come from like, she was able to do it because she came from Flint, right? There's that background of like, basically what I'm trying to say is when you feel like you're the major breadwinner, sometimes you don't want to take chances. And you're just like, yo, I got to pay off this debt. And I don't have time to put my money in the stock market. That would be great. But if I lose my money, particularly if you don't have, if you're not really knowledgeable about the stock market and
you're just new to it.
And okay, like, look, like me and and, I'm sure Dr. Simon knows now, like, the likelihood of you losing all your money if you do it the right way.
It'd have to be the zombie apocalypse.
Right? Like, that's not going to happen.
Money.
But if you don't know that much about it, you're like, yo, I ain't putting my money, I ain't gambling my money. I'm paying off this debt. You know what I'm saying? And it might be a message that maybe the kids then now will be like, okay, mom and dad did it this way. We kind of know that, hey, listen, if we end up having to take loans for any reason and it makes financial sense, then maybe we take more of a balanced approach and so forth. So I definitely understand his sentiments. I do have a question for you, though, in terms of paying off the debt, right? Once you became an attending. How did you do that? Like, can you walk us through that process of like, your income comes in, and then how did you pay it off, and how'd you do it?
How were you consistent?
Yeah.
I piggyback there.
Yeah. So I think a couple of ways. One was after I did the refinance and I knew that, okay, I've refinanced my student loans for a lower interest rate, but the payment increased. The payment was about $2,500 a month because I had condensed and truncated the payoff time. So I went from, under standard repayment would be 10 years, or even thinking about income-driven repayment, right, under 10 years technically. And now I've decreased that down to 5 years. So the first thing I did was I wanted to ensure that I could pay off this higher amount and do that consistently first before I try to. My plan was not to pay it off aggressively in 2 years and 9 months. My plan was to pay it off in 5 years.
Right.
So under a new attending salary, I'm still trying to manage stuff. I just moved in with my new husband. We're trying to figure out how to work things out. I basically just set it automatic. I removed myself from the equation. That payment, they got their payment every single month once the money hit the account.
So this was a new minimum amount that you're paying, like a higher minimum.
This is a higher minimum amount that I was paying. Yes, when I did the refinance.
5 hours or 5 years.
And so now then I did observations. Okay. So now this is automatic. How am I feeling about my money? Am I able to do the other things that I desire to do? We're newlyweds. We want to travel. We don't want to be stuck in the house, right? We want to eat out. We want to go to people's weddings. And so we were still able to do that. Okay, I'm able to do all that. I maxed out my 401k. I basically just put that on automatic. Okay, and I still have money left over. Okay, what else can I do? And when we think about finances, money, it has been given this branding that is very complicated. It's not that complicated. It's actually quite easy. Like if you could do medicine, you could do money. And so I knew, okay, the money equation in my mind is your income minus your expenses equals your opportunity. That opportunity was my ability to pay off my debt. And so how do I modify that equation? I could work more, do locums and moonlighting and all this extra to increase my income, or I could decrease my expenses, or I could rewrite the equation and I could say income minus your opportunities equal your expenses. So at this point, I was not up for working more because I've always been an entrepreneur. So I was working on a hair accessory in the background. That's a whole nother story. I was working on a hair accessory in the background. So I'm like, I don't want to see no more patients. I'm not trying to work extra. So how can I minimize my expenses? And to my husband's chagrin, like, because I'm from Flint, because I grew up in simple means, I knew how to like make the most. So I essentially decreased our expenses, and I lived very simply, and I would unplug things like the microwave and the TVs. And my husband was
Good night, everybody.
Yeah.
He was frustrated, right? And so I just figured out, okay, how can I minimize expenses? How can I leverage other tools that are accessible so that I can minimize expenses? So, at some point we got a credit card with points. We did not carry a balance on it, but we were able to leverage those points to travel. Yeah. And so it was just kind of doing some of those things. And then once I mastered that and I saw that there was still additional cash flow, I would put that additional cash flow. If I came into a windfall, like a bonus, we would get, our bonus every year. I knew that was coming in October after everything was done. Okay, let me put the extra money towards the student loans.
And that. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
So it seems like you were very systematic.
Yeah.
About things, and that you were just very intentional, which is, what we preach on the show all the time is that, nobody's paying off debt, in 2+ years on purpose, without purpose, right? Like it's not going to be by accident. You have to be very purposeful about what you're doing, and unplugging the appliances is diabolical, as the kids say.
I left the refrigerator plugged in, right? Because I didn't want to waste the
food. Yes, that would have been counter to what you were trying to do. All the food spoiled. Child, we got to buy more groceries.
Now, because you did mention earlier that you have some other projects. I think you mentioned real estate.
So we are diving, and we have one real estate property right now that we own. And my goal is to purchase 2 more, or our goal. I think it originated with me, but now my husband's like, yeah, when we buying our next property. So to purchase 2 more this year. I'm not ready for it. I think my husband's like, yeah, let's do this thing, but I'm not ready for it yet because I still want to read a little bit more. I want to make sure that I can evaluate properties pretty quickly, understanding, cash flow, the returns and all of that. And I just haven't practiced that enough. So it's a goal for this year and we're going to achieve it. I'm just not, the first quarter, I'm not ready yet.
Yeah. No, I get it. Yeah. I get it. Now, for the folks that are listening right now and they're like, okay, well, I'm getting mixed messages, right? And it's also a scary time government-wise, right? Like, okay, so there's PSLF that's out there. I can use the arbitrage. I can use, paying off a lower amount. If I stay at a hospital, for 10 years or a nonprofit hospital for 10 years, I can use the additional monies, to invest or do something else with it, right? Which is what you're talking about and what, we didn't do. Or, there's also the other message of just pay it off and get it done quickly because we don't know if PSLF is still going to be here. We don't know if hospitals are going to be considered nonprofits anymore or anything like that. What's your advice for folks listening right now, like the resident who's up and coming, getting ready to finish, or an attending? How would you tell them to handle their debt?
Yeah, I think that's a great question because there's so much uncertainty right now. And that was one of the reasons, that was my impetus to paying off my debt. And so whenever we make money decisions, my first sometimes not as logical as people want to hear, but my first recommendation is to turn internally. Because we look towards external sources often for information, but you got to figure out, okay, for you, what matters most to you? Is forgiveness the option that you want to pursue? Like, does it sound okay for you to work at a federally qualified center of some sorts, who has a 503c designation for 10 years? How does that feel for you? For me, I didn't want to be limited by that. Right. If I wanted to go part-time and not meet the eligibility criteria, then I wanted to have the freedom to do that. Right. Without somebody telling me that I had to go to work. I see so many of my female colleagues specifically who want to cut down because now they have children, but they have to go because they're under PSLF.
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
I didn't even think about that. I always think about they have to give birth. They have to take time off. But then I'm like,
it cuts into their time.
They can't take time off for PSLF also.
I mean, outside of your FMLA, maybe, but anything more than that, then no.
That's a whole different pressure I didn't think about. Yeah.
So it's like it's in some ways a golden handcuff, right? And so you just got to figure out for you. For some people, it doesn't matter. They're like, okay, I'm going to do 3 years of residency, 3 years of fellowship, and then I only have 4 more years. Like, that's no big deal. I'm not bothered by it. And if that is the case for you, then I say that forgiveness is likely a good option, and if you feel like, you want to have freedom to do other things, to pursue other passions, then forgiveness is probably not the best option. Then I think you have to just go introspectively to understand, how do you feel when the locus of control is outside of yourself? When we see that things can change depending on the administration, how would that feel for you if you would have done all of this and at the end of it, you still got to pay off your student loans?
Right.
And so for me, because PSLF feels like 1% of people were getting their student loans forgiven, I'm like, nah, I could do better than that. And so that was my perspective. After you've gone introspective, then the next step is just getting an understanding of what your debt profile is. I hate when people make decisions out of misinformation. There's no worse way to make a decision, right? And so you want to understand, what are your student loans? Where are they? Are they federal? Are they private? How much do you have? What are the interest rates? I got a spreadsheet. Just make a spreadsheet. I got one that I give to my clients. Happy to pass that along, but that's where you want to start at, because that's going to modify your moves of how you're doing things. And then go on a few websites, get a calculator, and see how much your monthly payments are going to be. Another thing that I want to say is, sometimes we feel disempowered that we have to pay the amount that is dictated to us.
Yeah.
No, you don't.
Yeah.
Like, your student loans,
they know better than me. So that's what they told me to pay is what I'm going to pay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so, no, there are ways to modify that payment. There are ways to negotiate, even if you have private loans with these companies. So I want you to now practice better understanding your debt profile so that you can leverage that understanding to negotiate for your benefit. If that's going for forgiveness and it's based on an income-driven repayment option, understand what it looks like when you make more money. Understand what it might look like when you get married. Like, what is that going to happen to your income? What is that going to happen to some of the other benefits that you might get as a married couple? But maybe you might want to file separately, but when you file separately, you lose some of those benefits, right? So you got to do this calculation to understand that. And sometimes we're just like, okay, well, I don't want to wait until I get there. And it has worked for a lot of people for the past 5 years. Most people haven't had to pay on their student loans. But at some point, those payments are going to be due. And you want to make sure that you can afford that payment. And you want to understand how that payment is going to be based so that you can actually make it. Because you don't want to put the loans into deferment, right? And then, or forbearance. And now you have, accumulation of interest. And you don't want to miss payments. And then it reflects poorly on your credit profile. So making the payment is going to be to your advantage from a financial perspective of lowering the amount that you have to pay and just overall making sure that you're financially well. And if you wait to figure out how much the payment's going to be until on the day that that payment is due, is less likely that you're going to have the money in the bank or you're going to feel good about the payment.
Right. I think, part of that psychological component, I think it permeates throughout everything you just said. I think there's one piece of it, at least for me, I can say that looking at the amount of money that you have to put out also, I think has that psychological component, right? Meaning, if especially as a resident, right? As a resident, you're not making the big bucks. You're making something, but you're not making the big bucks. But if you have $1,000 or $800 payment, right? Something that honestly, most of us who have gone from medical school to residency, we've never had an $800 payment each month for something. Like that in and of itself, right? So when you talk about introspective, going in and thinking about, I have to pay $800 a month for this. For me, I have to tell you, when I was in residency, that was a big blow to my mind. Like $800 a month? Like, what in the world? I've never had to make $800, an $800 payment per month for something. So when you are talking about being introspective, I think that there's that component of recognizing that seems like a lot of money to you. You know what I mean? And it's like, you got to get over that hump of recognizing that you're just going to have to pay a whole lot of money. But I will tell you, once we started paying off our loan debt, and Nee just mentioned that we would put $20,000 in at any given point in time to the loans, right? That actually didn't bother me. And the reason it didn't bother me is because I had a North Star. I had a plan. I knew when it was going to end. In residency, I felt like it was never going to end, but I didn't have a plan. So if you are, in a position, to the listeners, if you're in a position right now where you feel like, man, but this loan payment is so much, I'm telling you, if you have a plan, if you have a goal and you say, I'm going to pay it off in this much amount of time, that amount of money will not hurt as much anymore because eventually it's going to end.
Yeah.
It's like med school, right? It's going to end one day.
I think so. I agree with everything y'all are saying. It's the folks who are graduating with 400, 500 that I'm really worried about, because I get it, yo. I get it. Like, I get that you don't want to be at a place for 10 years, but yo, $400K as a single person, if you're single, on your own in terms of paying off debt, that's a lot of money.
That the show that said they had 600,000.
An individual?
Yeah, I believe so.
That's where it's like, you can pay it off. And I agree. You may want to consider paying it off all by yourself, but also at the same time, it's like, dang, if I could do it over a 10-year span with PSLF,
right,
and then be able to not spend that amount, if you know what I mean, just the minimum amount, it's something to think about. It's a lot to think about.
Yeah, but you got to look at your situation.
It's a very awkward place with medicine right now. I'm telling you right now, it's a really awkward place.
And with the current administration and everything up in the air, it's a lot. It's overwhelming, and I think that uncertainty leads to that overwhelm. But the long and the short of it is, like, I agree, Renee, like, you just need a plan. You need to create a plan, whatever the plan might be, forgiveness or paying it off. And then you need to be able to afford your payments. You need to understand how those payments are actually going to be calculated and what other life events will influence the amount that you have to pay. And I think oftentimes we wait until the payment is due to figure all that stuff out. But you're going to be much farther ahead if you start to conceptualize this stuff now. Yeah, the government is crazy. They put my payments on pause. Thank you, Jesus. I ain't got nothing to pay right now. But let me actually do a little bit of understanding of what does this income-driven repayment option mean. So if it's based upon my adjusted gross income, how do I adjust my gross income to be the lowest amount so I pay the least amount over time? If that means that now, instead of buying shoes or going on the trip or whatever the case may be, contributing to those things that don't bring you joy, you contribute a little bit more to your 401k and you get that income down a little bit. So I think either way, in this arena of uncertainty and all of these economic changes, it is prudent for everybody to understand what they want to do, understand how they want to do it and what the payments are based on, and then also give yourself some grace and compassion that if you want to change the plan, you can change the plan. I was doing PSLF and then I paid my student loan off, and both ways work,
Right.
So listen, Dr. Brittne, you got a podcast. You got the amazing pod mic there. Listen, you sounding good and clear. We love it. So if someone's listening to the show and they're like, yo, man, I just want to hear more of what she's got to say, Dr. Brittne, tell them how they can find more about the Wealth Minded MD. Actually, tell them what it's about. And then
tell us what it's about, when you launched, who your co-host is. Tell us all about that.
Yes, thank you. So we launched last year, February 28th. Our first podcast episode came out. And it's
happy anniversary.
Thank you.
Podiversary, excuse me. Podiversary.
Still teaching this girl.
And it's with Dr. Alicia Taylor, who is a sports medicine doc. She's at Morehouse right now, so I know that makes you all happy. We called it Wealth Minded MD because we are MDs, but also the MD stands for money decisions. And we really come from a position of vulnerability and also expertise, because we want people to know it's not all about getting things right. I think many times that pigeonholes us into seeking a financial advisor or paralyzes us from even getting started because we don't want to make mistakes. So on the podcast, we share our money mistakes. And to say, like, look, I don't know how many years in the game, and we've been doing this, and I got charged a fee because, I didn't put something on automatic, or I did this.
That's what's
up. So I think it's really important.
Yeah. A lot of people don't do that.
It's really important to just normalize it. It's not about the mistakes that you make. It's how you recover, how you learn from them, and how you apply them to, your next money move. And it's all about your money decisions. And at any point, your money decisions can change. And we want you to just thoroughly understand that. So we talk about our lives. You'll hear me talk about my kids on the podcast, my husband, Leisha's travels as a single woman. But then we also get nitty gritty and talk about backdoor Roths. And, I'm going to be sharing how we did this strategic tax move to save about $23,000 on our taxes this year, without using extra money. And so we allow for people to get a glimpse into our lives and our pocketbooks, as my grandmother would say. So that's Wealth Minded MD Podcast. We're on Apple Podcasts. We're on Spotify. You can find us on Instagram as well.
That's right, everyone. On all your DSPs, everywhere. What you want to say?
Hold on. So is pocketbooks like old folk kind of
That's what
term?
you said.
Yeah, my grandmother would
I
say.
grew up with pocketbook.
Yeah.
Pocket. Well, okay. There could be two types of pocketbooks, I guess.
Collapses and everything and stuff too. Oh yeah.
Pocketbook could be a different term, but for this reference, we're talking about your wallet. But yeah, my grandmother would sometimes call another part of my body. Yeah,
pocketbook. I remember that too. That's not quite what I was talking about, but I remember that too.
See, now we podding, Dr. Brittne. You know what I'm saying? But there it is, guys. Wealth Minded MD. You can find her on all your DSPs. That's right. The same way you listening to this podcast, that's the same app that you're going to use to find Wealth Minded MD. That's Apple Podcasts. That's Spotify. That's Google Podcasts don't exist. But there's Pocket Cast. Anywhere where you listen to your favorite music, your favorite audiobook, that's where you're going to find Wealth Minded MD. Also, the link to her show is going to be in the show notes. So, Dr. Brittne, we appreciate it. Yo, too bad you're from Boston. But listen.
She's from Flint. She lived in Boston.
She's from Flint. She's from Flint. Shout out to your Detroit Lions and to Michigan, to University of Michigan. That's what's up. But, we really appreciated you coming on this show. This was a very informative
show. Fun conversation.
And I don't think we've ever talked to someone who started off PSLF and got off PSLF and just said, go pay it off on their own. So that's a great story for y'all to take a listen to.
Thank you so much. This has been the most that I've laughed on a podcast. So thank you for that. Laughter is good for the soul, and I appreciate y'all.
Yo, mugs be too stiff. That's what it is. People be too stiff all the time, and that's why I appreciate.
Schools of thought about money.
It's like, and that's why I appreciate your show. That's why I appreciate your show, because I think that people need to start sharing more of their losses, right? Mm-hmm. So that's why we haven't done like those type of episodes in a while. Which now that you mentioned it, we need to go back to that. But like we started off doing whole life. Mm-hmm. Even though it didn't work for us, we started off with that, and then we got rid of it, and then we paid off our debt, and then we made other mistakes along the route, our pathway and stuff. And I think it's just as nice as it is to share your wins and to share how glamorous your life is and so forth. I think it's equally important to share the mistakes so other people can be like, I see what that person did. Yeah. Let me not do that immediately out of residency and so forth. Let me pick the right spouse. Let me talk to my spouse the right way. Let me not be on the lam with the IRS. You know what I'm saying? Like, these are just things. Am I telling you a story? These are just things that, the more you share.
On the lam. Huh? I just owed them a whole lot of money.
Yeah, and they was coming for you.
Well, so I married you?
When I bailed you out.
You paid it.
And when I bailed you out, I'm teasing y'all. But listen, it's about sharing your wins. It's also sharing your losses. And Dr. Brittne, we appreciate you coming on the show, yo.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
All right, y'all. Let's be out.